I watched a movie last night that had me feeling so many things and left me in tears, and I highly recommend you watch it. If you have not seen the movie yet, but you want to still see it, please pause this video, come back later to check out my review, but there will be a lot of spoiler alerts because I have to talk about the plot to talk to you about my analysis. Train Dreams is available on Netflix, and it features Joel Edgerton, who plays Robert Graier, Felicity Jones, who plays Gladys, and various other well-known actors and actresses. It's from this year, 2025, and it is an absolutely beautiful movie that revolves around the life of a man named Robert Graier, who is a logger, received multiple nominations.
There were once passageways to the old world. And even though that old world is gone, you can still feel the echo of it. We just cut down trees that have been here for 500 years. Every thread we pull affects the design of things.
Don't you think it's too much? What if you got nothing left to give?
Don't worry. You'll find a way.
Please go watch this movie if you haven't yet. It is, as they say so beautifully, even in this trailer, it deals with all that is part of life. It revolves around Robert Graier. Again, plenty of spoiler alerts coming, so be aware, please. It revolves around a man named Robert Graier, who is a logger and a railroad worker. And it takes us on his life from childhood, where we find out that he was sent on a train ride to a new place at the age of 6 or 7, doesn't know the year or month or day that he was born, and doesn't really know anything about his parents. He just has broken up memories from his childhood, as early as working in a store and Chinese people or Asian people being deported, being taken out violently. And it references violence and discrimination and racism from an early on part of the plot, but it's just seasoned in. It's almost like a foreshadowing of another part that would really change his life significantly. We don't know much about his past. He does not either. He's this young man who feels lost, like he doesn't really have a purpose. And that's poignant because that is relatable. Everyone born, some do know where they come from, some don't. We all want to know where we belong, though. Even when we do know who our parents are or when and where we were born, throughout life, we all search for belonging. We all want to know our heritage, our lineage, in some shape or form, some more, some less. But we long to figure out what is our name. That's how we identify ourselves to strangers. What is my name? Who am I? What do I do? My job, my name, my lineage is often directly tied to our sense of self and therefore our meaning in this world. And so we have a man here who doesn't know really where he comes from and feels like this lack of purpose and emptiness. And that is also a feeling that is such a powerful way of depicting what many people go through in life at some point in their life. That feeling of what's the point of all this. He then meets a beautiful woman named Gladys and falls in love, and they build a cabin, and it shows their young love and their hopes and dreams for the future, from having a cabin with a beautiful window and the things they could possibly do with this land to having a daughter together. It speaks about love and relationship intimacy. At one point, he talks about how he loves when she says his name, and he asks Gladys to say his name one more time, and she softly says Robert, and that echoes throughout the movie at times, which is such a powerful nod to, again, our search for identity from the beginning of the movie to the end, that longing to hear someone say our name. For if I don't see my reflection in another person's eyes, if nobody says my name, do I really exist? I think this speaks to why we long to be known by somebody, for someone to see us, to know us, to call us by name, that we belong somewhere, that we know where our place in this universe is. It then shows how they have a child together and how he has to be away for his logging and his train track work a lot, his railroad work. And it shows the dynamics of marriage, their intimacy, them trying to figure out how he can be home more and maybe how they can work on a business together. Her trying to make it work and possibly go with him. Also a conversation about relationship, that dance between a man trying to provide, a woman doing her part, trying to work together and not lose connection. As he leaves for one of the last times, his daughter doesn't want to say goodbye. She's a little child, a toddler at this point. Gladys is trying to get her daughter to say bye to daddy, but Katie, the daughter, is in her own little world playing with flowers and maybe so used to him being gone that she doesn't want to say goodbye because of her own sadness. Maybe she's sad. Her dad has to keep leaving. Maybe she is so used to it that she'd rather not say goodbye. This little girl is going through her own emotions and responding accordingly. And of course, it hurts dad and makes mom feel bad because they want to say goodbye to daddy. He wants to have a chance at saying goodbye. And that too, I think, so powerful because we all long for that. We want to be able to say goodbye. When someone dies, it's so painful to have not said goodbye. That often is tormenting to people because they say, I didn't expect it. I couldn't even say goodbye. When we look at conversations about grief and death and life. But it also addresses young love parenting, struggles in marriage of trying not to lose disconnect, trying not to be apart for too long, trying to keep the family going, keeping the life going. That's so relatable. Marriage is hard work. Relationship is hard work. Parenting, you love your child, you want to be in their life, but it's hard. It's hard work. And they are their own person. Kids are their own people that have their feelings about the things we do and the choices we make and the things we have to do in life. It then takes us on this journey of the different people that he works with. And a significant key point in the plot is when a Chinese man or Asian man is taken by a bunch of other railroad workers and is thrown off the bridge. And at first, Robert does ask, what did he do? And he tries to kind of step in and is then kicked back and stays behind in shock and wondering, what did this man do? Why is he being thrown off? And it's pretty heavily implied that this man did nothing wrong, that this is a racial hate crime and he's being killed for being Asian. And this then begins this journey of the demons that plague Robert, because he starts feeling like everything else that is to follow is punishment for the choice or the things he didn't do, how he didn't save this man's life. And this dead man, this Asian man, appears in Robert's mind every so often throughout the movie. And it's well made because it looks like he's, seeing ghosts, but it's more this idea of these things are haunting him. Because we keep seeing scenes then of even Robert being on the train and seeing another bridge that will be built in the future with cars driving on it. We see that in the distance. And it just beautifully ties past, present, and future together. Calling this train dreams is powerful because the idea of being on a train is so fitting to life. We're all on a train of life, on this journey to somewhere or nowhere. And we all have dreams along the way. Some of them nightmares, some of them hopes and dreams and goals, some of them visions of ghosts that are haunting us. And so there's this beautiful conversation between the past, present, and future in life. We continue the journey. He works with different people, constantly haunted, afraid something bad will happen to him. People dying around him from accidents with the trees because this is a very dangerous job. He makes friends and different men that are very unique. One man that won't stop talking and seems to know so much about the Bible and then turns out was a murderer and is assassinated in the middle of the woods by a bounty hunter. Another man who has a lot of wisdom and loves to sing and write songs and seems to become a close friend, perhaps the closest friend to Robert, other than his wife, who then gets hit by a widowmaker, and that takes his life over the course of the next few days. And all these people around Robert are leaving or are dying, and Robert keeps feeling like that was meant for him, that death is around the corner for him because he did not save this Asian man, this Chinese man. And it's a conversation about choices and consequences. It's a conversation about not being a bystander when you see evil happening in the world, but also how our mind operates, that we think bad things happen as a consequence or punishment. One of his friends does at some point mention that he has seen good men fall and bad men rise, which is interesting because there's also religious text that says it rains on the wicked and the righteous. This idea of what is the point of life and who gets it good, who gets the struggle, who suffers, how does it work? What's the point of life? And learning that both good people die and bad people succeed. The journey continues where Robert wants to be on one last mission, and then this is supposed to be his last before he goes back to his wife and daughter Katie for them to start a sawmill. Tragedy erupts because as he comes back, a forest fire has broken out and has claimed the life of Gladys and their little girl Katie. And it's a heartbreaking scene where he goes into grief, where he rebuilds the cabin but is afraid to rebuild the bedroom. He sleeps on the burnt down ground for a long time, hoping they would come back. Even us as viewers are hopeful that maybe they hadn't gotten out, but it becomes more and more clear that he lost his wife and child to this forest fire. The cabin burned to the ground, and you just see the depth of depression and grief. A Native American man who owns the mercantile shop in town brings him food and spends time with him. And that was so powerful because it spoke of relationship and how isolation is just such a big part of life, but also such a detrimental part. When people grieve alone, when they're hurting and they're alone on this train ride of life, it is so much harder. And it just showed how powerful the presence of another human being is and how we were made for relationship. At one point they're hunting and it reminds Robert of his wife when she would hunt, and he breaks down and cries, and you just see amazing acting. But you see his grief, Robert's grief, as he makes himself vulnerable in front of this Native American friend and says they're never coming back. And he breaks down and he cries. And it's heartbreaking because it's so real. The grief, the pain, that loneliness. And it's powerful because his friend doesn't start comforting him or saying well-meant words. He's silent. He's just there with him. And he then says, let's skin the deer. We have to skin this buck. And it's to me, this is the conversation about life continues. We have to keep going. We have to keep moving forward. But also him saying, I'm with you. I'm here with you. We got to keep choosing life. We're going to have to skin this buck and keep living. Different people along Robert's way that impact him, that leave an imprint in his life. And then there's also an amazing conversation woven in this movie where it speaks about how everything's connected, because they talk about how the trees are over 500 years old and older. And one young man says, these trees will all regrow. We have enough trees for 1,000 years. And by then the first tree we chopped will have regrown. And the old friend says, I used to think that way too. And he speaks about how the trees, and I'm paraphrasing in my own way, trees are powerful. They go to war. They become killers when they are harmed. And it's a conversation about how everything in nature is connected. Even later on, after Robert is going through all his grief and he makes a new friend, this lady who works with a company that works with the forest and with nature. She even mentions how all of this used to be a huge glacier, thousands of feet of ice. And the conversation they then have just paints again this beautiful picture about how awe-evoking nature is, how amazing and majestic, but also how change happens. It's so powerful, their conversation, because it's not only beautiful when it comes to nature and how amazing it is how the earth used to be, but it's powerful psychologically because she points out that everything keeps changing and keeps moving. And she says in the movie at one point to him, and I feel like it's so fitting because he has seen all that grief. She points out that it didn't break the world. It keeps changing. It keeps moving. This forest that is so majestic now used to be a glacier. And you would have thought that was the end. These glaciers, you would have thought that was the end. And the rivers they now have come from those glaciers. But it wasn't the end. It didn't break the earth. It kept moving. And I think that is a nod to the grief that Robert is enduring after having lost his wife and child. It's this conversation about it's all connected and this is not your end. A conversation about respecting nature, also loving nature, understanding that it's not us against the trees. It's all woven together. She points out, even this environmentalist, she points out that if you look close enough, you don't know where it begins and ends. That entire network is all so interwoven. You can't really, when you look close enough, see where one thing begins and one thing ends, which is so true when we study trees and fungi and the natural organism. We so often think we've been plopped into nature like creation's gift, when we're just as much fertilizer for the soil when our bodies decay. Just as much as those leaves that wither and fall, we feed the soil that feeds the tree. We are so much more connected. And in all that, he has his grief, he has his pain, his suffering, and these people that come across his path. It's a movie, a conversation about our ancestors. Where do we come from? Who are my parents? About our descendants, the life we create that we want to parent and love on. A conversation about love and passion, about new friendship and other people that have wisdom. The puppies that come into his life as he's grieving and rebuilding the cabin, that give him something new to care for, and humor and jokes in between when him and his Native American friend talk about what breed this dog is and how alpha wolves work with when they mate with the alpha female, and jokes that are part of the movie. But it's such a beautiful conversation about also finding new hope in love, trying to find a purpose, trying to figure out who you are in this world, especially after you loved someone so deeply. As he gets older and he's met these different people, and he keeps living life, and he works his way through the winter of life, which was powerful imagery too, as he went out of his cabin after he thought his daughter had come home, this girl that ends up on his doorstep, and he nurses her, or tries to nurse her broken leg. The next morning she's gone. He thought this was Katie who came back by some miracle. But the next morning she's gone, and he never seems to see her again. So the movie also implies maybe this was in his head, another phase of grief. Because he has visions of the fire. He imagines or envisions how his wife passed. And it just also shows the phases of grief, where we are either in denial, where we're mourning, where we have nightmares and flashes of things that were. But life just keeps moving forward, and he leaves the cabin eventually, and he works his way through the hard winter months. That too, a powerful symbol of life's seasons. The spring of our life and the love and having a child and finding love. The fall when things are changing, and also winter, the cold bare winters when we get older. And it then shows him getting older. He goes into the city and he experiences life. He goes to the theater and watches a show, a performance that has him in tears. Doing different things in the city and experiencing life, which I also feel is a beautiful nod to how you can also still experience life after suffering, after grief. You are still alive, and there's still things you might enjoy that you haven't done yet, things and places you can go that you haven't seen yet, give you new perspective. And then in the very end, he goes and as a very old man, life has worn on him, grief, pain, loss, love, friendship. And he takes a plane ride. And you just see the development. What was so powerful also throughout this is the development of everything. Because at one point when he tried to go back to being a logger, they were using chainsaws. And this young man was, taking the chainsaw and showing him how to do it because he couldn't quite pull the motor. And it just showed how times keep changing. Progress. We were going from axes to chainsaws, and now there's cars, and now there's planes, and time is passing him by, and age is written all over his life, is written all over his face. He even meets an old friend of his who had gotten really old at that point, who barely recognized him. And this friend is still out there doing trees, logging trees, which is interesting because that's a conversation as we get older that we have about old people who still have to work late into their age, and because they have no pension or into their pension. Conversation also about how work is just so much part of our life from start to finish. And this old man then asks about a mutual friend who had already passed. And I think it shows Robert that he does not want to end like this, because this man is still out there working, but his memory is fading. He doesn't remember that their mutual friend had died. He doesn't remember things. He's just so old, still out there among the trees. And Robert, at that point, the narrator implies that was the end of Robert's logging life. And he goes and he lives out his days and experiences life, tries things he's never tried before, takes this plane ride in the very end. And in the very end, it says that in that moment when up and down was not clear anymore, when what was up was down and what was down was up, because as the plane was moving around and he was in the sky, it was no longer clear what is up or down. He finally felt connected with it all. And he then passed away in his sleep, and it fades to his old cabin, overgrown by plants, by leaves, by trees. And it's absolutely beautiful, because it's this beautiful blend of the man-made cabin, the place we try to find home and shelter, and the place where we try to find love and procreate and cook and live. This place we built as part of who we are to make meaning in life is overgrown by nature, the very thing that we are so interwoven with with. It's no longer separate. It's all taken over, consumed, and connected. And in that moment when he no longer knows what's up or down, he feels connected to it all. And that was such a poignant, powerful statement, because that's what we're trying to figure out all our life. What is up? What is down? Who am I? Where do I come from? Where am I going? But sometimes in those moments when we don't know, when everything we thought we had clearly boxed in of what is right, wrong, up or down, where we're going, what we're doing, when that fades away, it doesn't even really matter anymore. You get to a point in life where all those things are not as important. You're flying free and you realize you are all connected and you can get to peace. And his expression there of peace after having lost his wife in such a brutal way, never been able to bury her. They were burnt, they were gone. He never was able to really say goodbye, never able to bury her. That grief, the guilt, which also comes up throughout the movie, the guilt of not having done more to save that Chinese man's life, the guilt of not having been at home when his wife and daughter were in danger. So many conversations that we all experience: guilt, shame, youthful hope, our search for self, where do I come from, our longing to love and be loved, our longing for someone to say our name, to know us, to see us, our desire to accomplish, our desire to provide and succeed and make money and a living for ourselves, our longing for answers when it comes to our place in this world, and the yin and the yang and the cause and effect of just how much the things we do have a consequence, of grief, of finding new love through friendship, through relationship, opening our heart again to other people, opening our heart again to life after having lost so deeply. A conversation about finding peace as we get older and hopefully wiser, when things are no longer up or down and it doesn't even matter anymore, and you finally realize you're connected, that your life is now, you're alive. Death is part of life. But it's okay, because we are all part of nature, part of this universe. Just like the leaves that fall into the ground and decay and nurture the soil, we too are part of that system. We're not alone floating in the universe with no purpose, meaning, or hope. We're part of it all, and we can find peace in that. It's a powerful conversation about life. A powerful conversation, film truly that reaches to the heart and soul. A conversation of an entire life. The rap said it well. It contains all the wondrous, devastating layers of an entire life. And then when he asks, do you think it's too much? Because he asks his ghost, that Chinese man that keeps appearing in his visions, isn't this too much? They didn't deserve that, my wife and child. But also such a poignant question to ask God, to ask the universe, to ask life. Isn't this too much? And somehow realizing it's all beautiful, just like his friend says before he passed. Below the trees, the majestic trees that were hundreds of years old, this man looks around and says, it's beautiful. And Robert asks him, what? Which part? And he says, all of it. A phenomenal movie that I highly recommend you guys watch. Subscribe here. Movie reviews once in a while, mostly music, documentaries, education, encouragement. I will see you on the next ride. Make sure to subscribe. Ayo.